Hey guys, welcome to another video of Time and Peace. And as you have seen in the intro, I finally visited Tokyo, Japan. It's been on my bucket list for a very long time, so I'm really glad that I finally got to go. But more importantly, on my trip to Japan, I had the opportunity to visit the Seiko Museum, which was also on my bucket list. So enough talking for me, and let's dive straight into the video. Before we go on about Seiko, I want to briefly talk about my experience in Japan. The first thing I noticed was that people in general are really polite. It's in their culture to not cause disturbance or harm to others, which I think is why they are very hospitable as well. So a lot of people told me before the trip that Tokyo is very similar to Seoul of South Korea. But looking at the city, Tokyo felt very modern and yet quite traditional at the same time. They obviously had the infrastructure and technology of a first world country, but their everyday life wasn't so centered around these perks. I've seen lots of people ranging from students to adults riding their bicycles instead of using their cars, which actually could be because it's very expensive to own and maintain a vehicle in Japan. But also, I've never used so many coins in my life as I did in Japan. Small shops usually accept only cash, and since some coins go for around $1, they are used all the time. Next, let's talk about my favorite thing in the world, food. For those who don't know, I love food. I love making them and I love eating them. It's not a secret that Japanese cuisine is loved globally, but few get to try it locally. I had the pleasure to do so, and I can say that it is delicious. It's what you would expect it to taste, but even better. Now, you do have to be wary of tourist traps and know where you are dining. Some places are alright, but some places are really good, and it will be an experience that you will remember for a very long time. Now let's finally talk about the Seiko Museum. The Seiko Museum is located in the Sumida ward of Tokyo City. The area is definitely one of the lesser populated areas of Tokyo, and it felt as if I was visiting my grandparents in the province. As I entered the museum, we were greeted warmly by one of their employees, who familiarized us with the basics. So the museum consists of 3 floors. The first floor was dedicated to the history of timekeeping in general. We were introduced to some of the earliest timekeeping instruments from various regions. This is an equatorial sundial made in China in the 17th century. This other instrument was made in Korea during the 17th or 18th century. It was fun seeing something from my home country. Okay, so this instrument here is pretty cool. This was made in Japan during the Edo period, and the way it works is that a powdered incense is put inside and it would burn in a regulated manner, which allowed time to be measured to some degree. It's really interesting seeing how all these older timekeeping instruments used to work, their mechanisms, and just the creativity of the people who made them. I'm also curious if this was some kind of creative effort from whoever made this to combine timekeeping and making your room smell nice, which is awesome. Now, most of the things I've seen until this point were of Eastern heritage, but the first floor also had some early European works as well. I'm going to read off the website on this particular piece. It says that using the same kind of mechanism as first appeared in Italy and Germany at the start of the 14th century, it uses a weight, crown wheel escapement, and a foliate balance. Time is told by sound alone, with bell strikes. It was accurate only to 30 to 60 minutes a day. This makes me think of the kind of progress that we made. This large instrument was accurate only to 30 to 60 minutes a day. Meanwhile, we have these small things attached to our wrist, which accuracy-wise is not even comparable to this old mechanism. It was really fascinating seeing all these old instruments. So I couldn't photograph every kind of instruments in the first floor because we were so busy just looking at them and admiring them. But on our way to the second floor, there was an area dedicated to Seiko's ties with various sports events such as the Olympics. And finally, upon reaching the second floor, we were faced with the man himself, Kintaro Hattori, the founder of Seiko. It is here we finally start to see some of Seiko's earliest works. Some of you looking at this might be thinking, where are the wristwatches? Well, the truth is that they actually did manufacture wall clocks, and they still do, like most watch companies. This one is something I really like. Look at the dial. It's even more gorgeous in person. Looking at this now reminds me of chocolate mint ice cream. You know what? If they made a wristwatch with this kind of dial, how do you think it would translate to? Would you still think it's admirable? Would you buy it? Or you think it won't really be as good on a wristwatch? So we also start to see some early wristwatches from Seiko. And to be honest, I was blown away by the number of watches I had no clue existed. I really find these pieces interesting. They look so futuristic, and I'm really digging the retro vibe it gives. And finally, here is the prized King Seiko. For those who aren't familiar, Seiko used to have two competing subsidiaries, Suwa Seikosha and Tiny Seikosha. This was to promote innovation and competition within the company. The two factories did not share any designs or materials from each other, so it was truly a competition to make the best timepieces. Although we now know that Suwa Seikosha ended up leading Seiko, Tiny Seikosha had some fan favorite pieces as well, most notably the King Seiko produced by Tiny Seikosha, as it had a rivalry with the Suwa Seikosha's Grand Seiko. So there we had a brief background on the King Seiko. The second floor also had an area for the dive watches. As you can see, I just had to wear my 009 for this photo. It was just too perfect. It kind of felt like brothers reuniting, which also made me want to buy more dive watches. And I can hear my wallet crying. And finally, there was an area for the Grand Seiko, one of my grail watches, and I know a lot of you watching this video, it's one of your grail watches as well. I apologize for the quality of the images, but the lighting conditions of the museum were not good for filming, and the glasses made it even harder to get good photos. But yes, after seeing many of these in person, I have to say, they are absolutely beautiful. And I still think they are very underrated despite more appeal from the community these days. Unfortunately, the third floor, which is a library, was closed on the day I visited, so the tour on the Seiko Museum ended here. My final thoughts on the Seiko Museum is that it is great for fans of the brand, and even people who are interested in watches in general. You're likely to find something interesting, be it the rich history of the brand or the fun timepieces that are not widely known. Lastly, I know that not everyone can or is willing to go to Japan and visit the museum, so for those who can't, you can always check the online VR museum, which I must say is pretty decent. In fact, I could say it's a little bit better because you get to see all these informations on your screen so you can take as much time as you want. Seiko is one of my favorite brands. I really admire what they do and what they have been doing. And overall, I think they're very underrated. Despite all the fans and cults, I still think they deserve more recognition. With that said, it was a pleasure to share my trip with you guys. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing and leave a thumbs up. And I hope to see you guys soon. Bye.